السلام على أشرف الأنبياء والمرسلين حبيب إله العالمين أبي القاسم المصطفى محمد اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد وعلى أهل بيته الطيبين الطاهرين لا سيما بقية الله في الأراضين إمامنا وسيدنا الحجة بن الحسن المهدي أرواح العالمين له الفدا. My respected brothers and sisters, Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. One of the fascinating verses in the Holy Quran that sets the stage for our discussion tonight is a verse in Surah Al-Rum, the chapter of the Romans. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in Surah Al-Rum talks about His grand signs, the signs that point us to the Almighty God. One of the signs that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala mentions is that we've been created from clay. The miracle of life. Science has confirmed this, that the source of life on earth is in clay. That's why the composition of the human body, if you analyze the elements in our body, they come from the same composition that you find in clay. That's one of the signs of Allah. Another sign of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is the diversity of our colors and languages. وَمِنْ آيَاتِهِ خَلْقُ السَّمَاوَاتِ وَالْأَرْضِ. And amongst the signs of Allah is that He's created the heavens, the universe, and the earth. وَاخْتِلَافِ what? أَلْسِنَتِكُمْ وَأَلْوَانِكُمْ. And the differences, the diversity that you have in your tongues, meaning your languages, and your colors. That in itself is a sign from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. You know, oftentimes when we look at other people, other races, other cultures, other backgrounds, other languages, some people feel uncomfortable being open to all these different types of people. Allah in the Holy Quran says, I, through my divine will, made you different. Think about that. Those of you who feel uneasy towards other races, other people, Allah says, I deliberately put that diversity in the human race for a reason. It's a sign from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Take it as a sign. And then Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala talks about some natural phenomena we find here on earth, such as the weather pattern. Allah says He sends the winds, they generate water vapor, and Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala dispatches that to faraway lands. That's a sign that shows you the greatness of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. He uses the simple wind, thin air that you can't even see with your own eyes, to carry billions of gallons of water. Isn't that a miracle? Now here's the fundamental point. Amongst these signs, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala mentions one of His grand signs. Allah says, don't just think this huge universe is my sign. I have put a sign that shows you my greatness in your own house. وَمِنْ آيَاتِهِ أَنْ خَلَقَ لَكُم مِّنْ أَنفُسِكُمْ أَزْوَاجًا لِتَسْكُنُوا إِلَيْهَا. And amongst the signs of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is that He has created from your own selves partners, spouses, in whom you find tranquility and peace. The Holy Quran considers a good spouse, a good husband, a good wife that gives you peace and security, you find tranquility in them, one of the signs of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. That's how important it is. That Allah puts it at par with the creation of the universe. How grand is this universe? Allah says, having a good spouse that you can find sukoon in, tranquility, is as great as the creation of the universe. This verse reveals how important it is, my dear brothers and sisters, to choose the right spouse. That spouse who's going to give you tranquility and peace. When we talk about the subject of marriage, it has many, many dimensions. What's the best age to consider marriage? What are the benefits of marriage? How do you resolve marital disputes, counseling, in-laws, problems? Where's the best place to go for a honeymoon? I can give you some good tips. But the focus of our discussion tonight is how to choose the right partner in our modern era. Society is ever changing. There are new social norms. The way that today the youngsters are getting married is quite different than how your parents and grandparents got married. So how do we get married in this age? How do I choose the right spouse? Now this discussion, my dear brothers and sisters, is important for all of us. If you're not married, obviously this is applicable to you. If you're parents, you're married, you have children, then this will also give us insight to help them choose the right spouse. If you're grandparents and you have grandchildren who want to get married, you can share your wisdom. So this discussion is important for all of us to engage in and to benefit from, because it's impacting us either directly or it's impacting our family members, our relatives, our children, our grandchildren. But this is a big challenge in our modern society, my dear brothers and sisters. In the past, if you go to past cultures, especially Middle Eastern cultures, you find that the issue of finding a spouse was simple. It's not something that people really stressed over. If you lived 50 years ago, 70 years ago in the Middle East, you didn't have to worry about finding a spouse, because people lived in a culture where the family basically decided that for you. They would figure that out for you. You'd grow up, once you're in the age of marriage, the families would work it out. That burden was lifted from you. So yes, when we look at previous marriages, they were semi-arranged. What do I mean by semi-arranged? See, arranged marriages, strictly arranged marriages in which the husband, the wife have no say in it, they don't give their consent, that's not an Islamic marriage. Islam abolished that. Islam said the man has to give his consent, no pressure, and the wife has to give her consent. You can't force your daughter to marry someone she does not want to. If you force her, Islam says that marriage is nullified, it's invalid. So what I mean by semi-arranged marriages is that basically the families matched you. They already had someone in mind, they suggested it to you, you give your consent, there you go, simple. The engagement happens and then the wedding happens. So in the past, the average youth didn't have to really stress over this issue. The families figured it out. But today we live in a different society. This old method no longer really works with the youth. It's no longer applicable in many parts of the world. So then what do? How do we start this journey of finding the appropriate spouse? And the spouse that has the good qualities that we want. So I'll share with you a few thoughts this evening, my dear brothers and sisters. And in the process of sharing these thoughts, I want to have an active discussion with you, to hear from your experience, to hear your suggestions about this very important topic, because I tell you, it's impacting our youth. The biggest item in their list today, when you sit with the youth and you ask them what are their challenges, is the issue of marriage. How do I get married? How do I find the right person? So it's something really important that's impacting our youth. The first point I'd like to share with you, my dear brothers and sisters, before you think of your potential spouse and the qualities that the spouse should have, Start by reflecting on your own self. Am I ready for marriage? Spiritually? Psychologically? Am I ready for marriage? Do I know what marriage even is? There are some people, I'll be very honest with you, especially some guys, they think marriage is this new stage in life where you are crowned as a king and you're treated as a king. It's an area where I benefit and I'm served day and night. That's a wrong conception of marriage. Who told you marriage means you'll be a king? If you enter marriage with this mentality, you're setting up yourself for failure and you will do injustice to your spouse. Marriage, Islam teaches us, is an institution that requires sacrifice, give and take. You contribute, your spouse contributes. You build together. You're not a king who is served. Marriage is an opportunity for you to serve. Think about it that way. Many people have this misunderstanding of marriage. And so they expect something, they realize, you know what, that's not going to work, and they fail. That's one of the reasons why the divorce rate is so high, my dear brothers and sisters, because people are getting married not knowing what the responsibility of a marriage is. And through marriage counseling, you hear about these challenges. One sister once was complaining from her husband. He did not work, even though Islam obligates him to work. And he wasn't disabled or sick, no. Lazy. He did not work. This may shock you, but it happens in society. This husband, who's not working, he would spend most of his day, more than 14 hours a day, playing video games with his friends. I'm talking about a father here, not a 16-year-old teenager who's addicted to video games. I'm talking about a father, a husband, who's playing video games. His wife has to go out and work. And the funny thing is, this person, from the outside, he gives you the impression that he's religious. He prays at home. I'm not here to judge. Allah judges our deeds. But I can guess with a lot of accuracy that the prayer is not exceeding the ceiling of that house. Allah wants you to be responsible. What's the point of praying in your house when you're playing 12 hours of video games and your wife has to work and you're not working? You're making a joke out of that salah. You're making a joke out of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and the laws of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So there must be an understanding of responsibility, that I start this marital life with sacrifice. And it's good to sacrifice. It's good to serve, my dear brothers and sisters. Those of you who started successful careers, how did you start your career? Didn't you start through internships? I've seen some youth, they compete to get a good internship. Sometimes they have to pay for that internship. Why would you do that? Because that's how a successful life starts, when you go and serve. If you want, the day you graduate, you want to be served? No. Society does not want you. They want to see that you know how to serve, because then they can trust that you'll be successful. Otherwise, they can't trust that you'll be successful. Same applies to marriage. Approach marriage with this mentality, my dear brothers and sisters, that it's about sacrifice. And teach your children that marriage is about sacrifice. It's about serving. It's about being responsible. That in itself helps a lot of our youth. So that's the first point here. The second point, those who want to get married, usually they have a list. I want my potential spouse to have the following qualities. I remember once a brother approached me and, he had this very long list of what the potential spouse should have. Sayyid, if you know somebody with these qualities, and he was very, very specific, right? What kind of degree she has, what kind of taste she has in life, what kind of preferences, her looks, her age, her weight, all of that. Very specific details. And then at the end, he's like, I'm really in a rush. Can I call you back in 2 days? I told him, Habibi, you know, I can place that order that you want on Amazon. But Prime shipping will not work here because what you want has to be shipped from Venus. It's going to take a lot more than 2 days for me to work on that. Some people have these long lists of qualities. Okay, which is fine. I'm not saying you should not have a list of qualities, but I asked this person one question, and I always ask the youth this question. Okay, so you're considering the qualities of your spouse. These qualities that you're considering, first of all, do you have them? You want a very kind wife. Are you a kind husband? You want someone who's not selfish, someone who's decent, someone who's generous. These are good qualities. I encourage all of you to pursue these qualities. But ask yourself first, do I have these qualities? What are the qualities that I have? Start with yourself. Then Allah will guide you through the next step. But it's really selfish for me to want all these qualities in my wife when I may not have most of these qualities or even half of these qualities. And if I don't have these qualities, my dear brothers and sisters, before you really go and get married, work on these qualities. If I'm a selfish person, work on that. If I'm a not generous person, work on that. Work on these qualities, then you'll be better prepared for marriage. Maybe you're not ready for marriage now. If I'm a stingy person, arrogant person, selfish person, I'm better off not getting married. Because if I do with these qualities, I'm going to ruin my family life and my marriage life. Let that tell you whether you're ready for marriage or not. Do you have these qualities that you're looking for? So that's the second point over here. When you're thinking of qualities that the other person potentially has, make sure you've got most of these qualities too. Be fair to your spouse. Now this leads us into the main part of our discussion. How do we start looking for the right spouse? If you ask parents these days in our communities, honestly, many of them are clueless. They don't know. Where should your son meet his future wife? Where should your daughter meet her future husband? Where? Is it at school? At the college campus? At the mall? At a wedding? Family gathering? Where should they meet each other? Parents usually are clueless. They don't know. Oftentimes they're not willing to even discuss these issues with their children, with their youth. And this creates a challenge for our youth. Most of the youth that come up to me, they ask me, Sayyid, where do I find the right person? Where? Show us. My family's not helping me. And I'll be honest with you, most of our religious institutions, you know, whether they're mosques, whether they're community centers, they really don't have something to offer to our youth in this regard. Because it's a difficult challenge. So they ask, where do we start looking? I feel I'm ready now. I'm 23, I'm 24. I feel I'm ready, but I don't know where to start. Should I go on Instagram and look at posts and figure, if someone's good for me? Should I spend hours on Facebook trying to do that? Some people do, by the way. One way that our youth today are using to find the potential spouse is through social media. I call them Instagram marriages. They do happen. I do know people, by the way, who got married through Instagram. Some of them have been successful. A few of them have been, but many have not been. How do you feel about that, my dear brothers and sisters? How do you feel about youth getting to know one another on social media? Because that's the easiest platform for them. When they don't really have something practical to rely on in society, naturally they will gravitate towards social media. Our youth are already active on social media. It gives them a platform to express themselves, so they feel comfortable with how social media works. So when it comes to the time of marriage, most of our youth, the first place they think is social media. That's a reality. So how do you feel about brothers and sisters getting to know one another on social media? What are the pros and what are the cons? Any thoughts, any experiences, personal experiences, or friends that you know have had experiences here? What do you say about that? And be honest, as parents and as children of parents, be honest. Tell us what you think. Yes, sister. That's a very good observation. One of the risks of trying to know someone on social media is that that person is going to show you their best side, the best of themselves. They will present themselves in a very positive way. You don't really get to know other aspects of this person's personality. What kind of a person is this? Is this person someone who deals with anger, selfish, stingy, generous? You really can't detect that on social media. Because people choose how to present themselves on social media. And, to put it in one clear word, people act on social media. We're all professional actors when we enter the public sphere, believe me. When you're in public, you don't behave the way you do in your private life, do you? Most people don't. We all put up an act. We're professional actors. So we choose what side of our personality we'd like to show. So one of the risks that come with social media is that you really don't know whether this person is genuine or not. This person has proper qualities or not. You don't know what you're signing up for. So I've known people who got to know one another on social media, and then the engagement happened, and then they discovered when they actually met in person and lived with each other a few weeks, they were hit hard with reality. That's not the person that I was interacting with on social media. Turned out to be a completely different person. And now I'm stuck. I'm in trouble. I don't know how to get myself out of this one. That happens all the time, by the way. So you have to be careful with social media. Yes, my dear brothers and sisters, social media does give you some indication of the personality of that person, but you have to do some research. Today, when you go and apply for a job, in addition to the interview, you know what many employers are doing? What do they check? Your social media accounts. You know that? They check your Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, Snapchat. Why do they do that? Why do you think an employer does that? Who cares what you're doing on social media? But no, they're checking it these days. I've even read articles that universities, when they get student applications and they're deciding which students to accept, you know one factor they're using to determine who gets accepted is your social media account. They do quickly check it. They go through it. Why do you think that is the case? Our activity on social media does reflect who we are to an extent. See what kind of post this person usually, puts online. What kind of posts do they react to? What are some of the likes that they put? It tells you a lot about how the person thinks. And how much time does this person spend on social media? That's important. If you're getting to know someone and you realize the person is online like 24/7, spending 6-7 hours a day on social media, let me tell you, right off the bat, that's a red flag. You don't want to marry someone who's on social media 7 hours a day. That's recipe for disaster. That in itself is an indication. So there's a lot you can discover through social media. Don't underestimate it. It's a powerful tool that reflects parts of our personality. Try to assess how much time is this person spending on social media. What do they do on social media? What kind of posts do they read and react to and respond to and like? It's important for you to know that. It gives you an indication of what type of person this is. What are some other thoughts that come to your mind about youth getting to know one another through social media? Because it's happening, let's face it. It's the first place that youth go to in trying to explore their options. Yes, brother.
What are the deficiencies of religious institutions like this and others to guide people? I mean, this is grossly lacking, and the people that are responsible for it are the Maulanas like you, because if you have got places to put where you can connect people with people, things will work better. I come from the tribal areas of Pakistan. When we marry a girl over there, we see how their mother is. If the mother is a fighter, the daughter is going to be a fighter. Stay away. If the mother is a good mother, you will raise good daughters and they will have a very good family. So, I mean, for my suggestion for young people, when you get married, look at your mother-in-law. If your father-in-law is afraid of her, just a suggestion. Because the home environment is totally, ultimately controlled by the women. No matter, they may talk nice and it may, but at the end, you got to do what your wife wants to do.
They say a young man was looking for a spouse, so he found one. Didn't work out. His friend asked him, what happened? He's like, I thought I found the right person, but my mom did not accept. She didn't like her personality. He's like, keep trying. He found another person. Again, this time, his mom vetoed her. No. His friend was smart. He told him, look, I think I know what your mother is hinting here. Find someone who has the same character and personality of your mother. Someone similar to her. She will accept. He's like, okay, very good tip. So after a while, he finds a girl who resembles his mother in her character. Very similar to his mother. Same attitude, very similar personalities. So his friend really got happy for him. You know, he's like, okay, soon I'm going to hear there's an engagement and a wedding. Well, weeks later, he realized it didn't work out. So he ran to his friend. He told him, what's the matter? She's not like your mother? She's like, no. She's a copy of my mother. So he said, then what? What happened? Your mother didn't accept? She's like, oh no, my mother fell in love with her. But this time, my dad said no. He's like, I can't stand your own mom. Want to bring someone like her? No. So thank you, brother, for sharing that. By the way, one brother last year, he was telling me how his parents got married overseas in a European country. Very interesting. He said in that tribe, because you mentioned something about that, village in Pakistan. He said in that tribe, this is how they would get married. The boys would stand in one line, and then the girls would be standing on the other side. And then how would the girl know who her husband is? Because the tribal leaders would decide that. They basically had no role. So he's like, my mom, she was, I think he said she was 16, 17. She was standing here when she saw this little kid, this little short boy who was 14 years old. He came towards her and he stepped on her feet. That was the signal that the tribal leaders had chosen him. So she looked at him, she's like, oh no, don't tell me you're going to be my husband. And it turned out that he was her husband. Yeah, so villages and tribes have different ways of arranging for this. So going back to our discussion, we'll get to the role of the mosques, because it's a very important discussion here. But let's just talk about social media before we move on to other venues. So let me hear some more thoughts. Let's hear from the sisters. How do you feel about youth getting to know one another on social media? Yes. There is a potential risk with social media. There are fake identities out there. You can't trust the person. You don't really know the person. Maybe the person wishes harm for you. Maybe the person wants to take advantage of you, exploit you, scam you. You'll even hear some outrageous stories of people monitoring your social media account to see when you're in the house and when you're outside the house. And these days, mashallah, we freely give information. Everything that happens in our homes, that 2 minutes later, it has to be on Facebook and Instagram. The minute you wake up in the morning, what happens in your bedroom, and then in the kitchen, and then when you leave, with a very nice photo trailer, we are letting the world know what's going on. And especially with the selfie obsession, which is another topic. You know, there are people who monitor your account, and when they realize, okay, you just posted an image, I left the house now, I'm going to this place, we're going on a vacation, they break into your house because they know the house is empty. That's happening. So you need to be careful with social media. Do you trust this person? Do you really know this person? Do you know the intentions of this person? You have a pure good intention. How do you know the other person has a good intention? That comes as a major risk when it comes to social media. Yes, brother. So one of the risks of social media, can we summarize it this way? That because of that representation, it disconnects us from reality. And therefore, it's not something that's really practical. That's another risk that comes with social media. So my dear brothers and sisters, I don't want to deny that sometimes social media does help connect the youth, even in an appropriate way. As I said earlier, I do know decent young men and women who got married, and alhamdulillah, they have a successful marriage now. And that's how they met, each other. They were active on social media, especially with religious posts, and then they got to know one another, they got married. It can work sometimes. But here's my verdict. It's not something really reliable that you can rely on. It comes with risks. If you're really someone who's experienced, you're aware of all these risks, okay, maybe it's something you can test and try. But for the average youth, I would not recommend it. Because the risks are too high. The potential dangers are too high, and we're not aware of them. And we really don't know how to navigate, the world of social media, and to distinguish the superficial part of that world from the real part of that world. It's not easy, believe me. It requires a lot of experience. It requires someone who knows how to navigate that. Most of the youth are not equipped to navigate that. So it could work for some, but for most people, it's not the best of places to look for a spouse. Any other thoughts? Sister, you had a thought, and then I'll get to you, brother. Correct. That's a very good point. Correct. That's a very good point, sister. My recommendation is use social media to help you research a person whom you might be interested in. That's where social media can help you. So let's say you're starting to talk to someone, you want to know more about this person to really know if you should pursue it or not. Now at the stage of doing research, which we'll discuss soon. A good place to start is social media. Go to this person's social media accounts and see what kind of a person is this. What kind of pictures are they posting? What kind of posts? Number 3, mutual friends. Sometimes the list of friends tells you a lot about the person. What kind of friends do these people have? Mutual friends. So social media, my dear brothers and sisters, is a good tool to research about a real person that you might be interested in. But for you just to go out there in this world of social media and find a spouse, I would generally advise against that. It comes with too many risks. It may not be worth it. And by the way, your families, generally speaking, are not open to it. I'll be very honest with you. Even if you find the best, sweetest person on earth on social media, when you bring it up to your parents and they ask you, okay, Habibi, Habibti, where'd you find this person? How'd you get to know this person? The minute you say online, khalas, they're going to close the file. I'm being honest with you. Most parents are still not prepared to accept that for their children. They don't find this as an appropriate place to get to know someone. So you won't really have the support of your family, in most circumstances. So it's not a practical place where you can recommend to the youth to find that potential spouse. So that's social media, we've discussed that. What are some other venues that you believe are practical in society that youth can use to find an appropriate spouse? What do you say? If right now your son or daughter comes up to me, your son comes up to you and says, look, I am now ready for marriage. How do I start? You as a parent, what do you say? What do you do? We have to have a solution. They are our children. We can't just leave them hanging in the air. We need to help them out. Yes, brother.
I'll check with my friend in my community and I ask if they know anybody and I try to get it together, which is happened in my case.
You'll check with a friend in the community and to see if they have recommendations. My dear brothers and sisters, one of the best ways to look for a potential spouse is to approach a respected member of your community. Someone who's trustworthy, who has a history, you can trust them. Someone who's well connected with families. They have experience. They are active socially. They know a lot of families. Either directly approach that person or have a family member approach that person or a friend and ask them. Tell them, Haj Fulan, Haj Fulana, you are a decent person. We can trust you. You know a lot of families. I'm a person you can investigate about me. I'm serious. I'm not here to fool around, but I really want to get married. Help me out. Give me suggestions. Introduce me to good families. Where should I start looking? Usually, my dear brothers and sisters, this is an approach that works for many, many people. It's a reliable approach. And the hadith from the Prophet ﷺ states, one of the best shafa'as. See, shafa'a has two meanings. One, the religious shafa'a, where Allah will do shafa'a for us, forgive us our sins. The Prophet does shafa'a for us, intercession, the Imams of Ahlul Bayt. Then you have worldly shafa'a. Worldly shafa'a means when someone helps you for a cause. Helps you find a job. That's a type of worldly shafa'a. You get rewarded for that. The hadith says one of the best shafa'as is to bring people in marriage. To help someone get married. Either introduce them to someone who's appropriate, or if they're financially struggling, to sponsor their marriage. The hadith from the Prophet says this is one of the best types of shafa'ah that you can engage in, to help someone get married. So this is one method, my dear brothers and sisters. Go up to a community member that you respect, ask them for suggestions. They can give you a lot of good suggestions. And Imam Ali ibn Abi Talib alayhi salam did that when he wanted to marry which wife after Lady Fatima alayhi salam? We've discussed this before when we commemorated the death of that wife of Imam Ali alayhi salam. Who? Which one? Ummul Baneen, mother of Abu al-Fadl al-Abbas alayhi salam. How did the Imam marry her? How did he find her? Who did he send? Through his brother Aqil. He had an older brother by the name of Aqil. Aqil was an expert in ancestry. He knew families, well connected. He knew that this Arab family or tribe has these qualities, right? He knew all of that. So Imam Ali ibn Abi Talib approaches Aqil and he tells him, I want you to find me a spouse that is born into a tribe that has a history of courage and honor. وَلَدَتْهَا الْفُحُولَةُ مِنَ الْعَرَبِ. Because I want Allah to grant me a child who will be at the peak of courage to help my son Hussein in Karbala. See Imam Ali ibn Abi Talib, how he took this approach? Now the Imam has divine guidance. He can figure that out, but the Imam is teaching you and me. Go to an expert in your community who knows families and the qualities of those families. Let them make a recommendation. And that's exactly what Aqil did. He gave it some thought. He did some research. He came back to Amir al-Mu'mineen. He told him, I found you a good person. This family from Bani Kilab is an excellent family. They have the qualities that you want. And that's how the marriage of Baneen happened. Aqil came on behalf of Imam Ali. He proposed. She accepted. And the marriage happened. So this is one reliable way, my dear brothers and sisters, that you can seek. Approach that person and let them know. And by the way, I'd like to make a comment here. Culturally, it's expected that the boy comes forward. He is the one who asks, and he's the one who's trying to find a girl. I know culturally that's how it is. But my dear brothers and sisters, I want to make it very clear tonight. There is nothing aib or shameful. If a girl goes to a respected community member whom she can trust, and she signals her interest in marriage, that I am at the stage where I am considering marriage. Do you know someone whom maybe you can introduce? Today, if a girl does that, I'll be very honest with you, quickly she is judged by people in the community. And the first people who judge are who? The men? Huh? No, not the men. So you need to work that out. We're not going to get involved. I'm being very honest with you. I hear this all the time. If the woman, even married women, that's what surprises me. Married women who went through the same process. If they see a girl who's maybe showing interest that, okay, I want to get married, they put her down, they judge her. Aib. Ma tuhki al-haki. Why? What's aib about it? If she's decently in honor, signaling that, okay, she's now ready for marriage. Why is that wrong? Didn't Lady Khadija alayhi salam, the foremost lady in early Islam, signal her interest to marry Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam? She's not a role model for us. Yes, I'm not saying that the girl has to go there in public sphere and announce to the world that she wants to get married. No, of course, there are expectations of modesty. But if she's being modest, she's being respectful, she's signaling it in a very dignified way, it is a big sin to judge her, my dear brothers and sisters. And I tell you, this is one big factor that discourages most of our sisters in our community from signaling that or approaching, a family member, an elder family member, a community member, signaling that they are interested in marriage. They're scared of the consequences. They know they will get judged. This needs to be changed. What are your thoughts on that? If I'm wrong, let me know. If you have a different perspective on this, let me know. I'm open to hearing that. Who disagrees? Or what are some other perspectives you have about this particular point? Do you feel, sisters, do you feel that it's inappropriate for a sister to signal that she is interested in marriage? Be honest. Well, it's not that easy, brother. As I said, if you sit with the youth and you hear their complaints, this is one of the complaints. They're usually quickly shut down.
The world has changed. Wherever you go, you must accept the change. If you don't accept the change, you become a dinosaur. All the people must remember that, especially the young one. It's really a shame that we have got a very big community and you are seeing people that are already married. The people, there are so many Arab students in the universities, it's really a disaster that you see just so few coming here. That's a weakness of our community, which as elders we can put nicely to our children, but that depends who raised them. Again, depends on mothers. You know, mothers have got to do a better job of educating their children than fathers. They don't listen to, but mothers, I think, should do a better job. We should see so many students. You know, there are just 6 people over here from the university. We have got more than 120. When we have got a good dinner, you see the whole hall filled. You come over here like this, that is really a disaster.
Brother, do you blame anyone for loving the dinners here? We all love the dinners here. You can't blame us for that. I know. I'm just kidding.
Such an important topic. Just a very important topic.
You make a very valid point. This is a topic, my dear brothers and sisters, for the youth. Alhamdulillah, we have many decent youth with us tonight, but many are missing out. This is an important topic that they need to be a part of. We need to hear them out. But it seems, they may be busy with other activities on a Friday night. I don't blame some of them. It's really hard on a Friday night to come and, sit through a lecture, right? Especially my boring lectures. I don't blame them. It's okay. So this is one method, my dear brothers and sisters. Let's talk about a very sensitive point and method. The role of mosques. Most of the mosques that we have around the world, even in the country, are segregated. They're either fully segregated or semi-segregated. So it's not really a venue where the youth can meet one another. Now we have 2 perspectives here. One perspective says we need to uphold modesty in the houses of worship. And we know that if the 2 genders fully mix, there's no separation whatsoever, then we don't know what kind of consequences there will be. Many families will be concerned. I don't know who's looking at me, who's looking at my daughter, who's looking at my sister. It concerns me. I don't know if everybody out there has good intentions. I don't know that. This discourages many mosques and those in charge of the masjid or the institution or the community center to promote a spirit of more interaction between the genders, because it does lead to consequences. Many families will not be comfortable. I personally know that if certain mosques remove barriers and promote a spirit of more interaction, a lot of families will stop coming. No, I'm saying this out of experience. I do know that. I'm not saying whether this should be or should not be. I'm just describing to you the situation. Yes, brother.
But they don't mind sending their daughter or their wife to Kroger or to Walmart. Everybody, different religion, different whatever, there, he see that daughter, and he say, Dad, I see that girl. We come here, I don't see most of the women. I walk out, I don't see them, and they come and they don't see me, or they see my children.
That's the other perspective.
You also sit with your family, or even in this mosque, the girls are separate, the men are separate, but you sit with your wife, and that's what you live in this world, get used to this world. You cannot live like Pakistan and Saudi Arabia or Qatar. This is the new world. Accept it. Otherwise, you become dinosaurs.
Brothers and sisters, this is an important discussion. I know it's a sensitive discussion too, but there are two perspectives. Both sides have very valid arguments. So one side says, I have a religious responsibility here. I want to make sure that at least in the houses of worship, nothing indecent happens. That's valid. You need to take that into consideration because it's a responsibility on the board members, the religious scholars, or even the volunteers. It is a responsibility. They don't want something where, it could lead to something immodest and then be responsible before Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. That's one side. But the other side has a very valid point. The other side says, look, if my children are not going to get to know a member of the opposite gender in a decent place, which is a mosque, then where do you expect them to meet? College? You're happy with that if your kids meet in college? Or at the mall? Or somewhere out there in society? At least we know that those people who come to the mosque, at least chances are they have better intentions. Why would a young man or a woman come to the mosque? That's the other perspective. I'm just stating the perspective here. I'm not taking sides yet. Why would a young man or a woman who has ill intentions come to the mosque? They have thousands of other places to go to. So one criticism that we're getting is, how come the religious institutions are not giving our youngsters more and more platforms to meet one another? Many families are still against that. They don't think this is acceptable. There are families who will stop coming to the mosque. I'm very honest with you. If they feel that the environment at the mosque is like that, where there is no strict separation. So now we have these two perspectives. What do we do here? Let's hear from some brothers and sisters. What are some real concerns? We need to know this. We need to be part of this discussion. Because my dear brothers and sisters, this solution of finding the right spouse is not a solution I can come up with. The board member can come up with. It's a solution the whole community needs to collaborate to come up with a solution. So we need to be part of this discussion. So let us know, what are your thoughts? So we've heard a perspective here, we've heard a perspective there. What are some more thoughts about this?
Can I comment?
Yes.
If I come here, or my son or my daughter, and I raise them good, and I tell them what's going on on the other side of the world, it's no reason I should be worried about my daughter. This gentleman look at her, or because I know what I raised. I believe people who are so want to stay so close and not open to others, they must have a.
So brother, let me play the devil's advocate. You've raised your son or daughter good. How do you trust the other side has had that similar upbringing?
If he's bad, he's bad.
Okay, if he's bad, some families will not be comfortable. If their daughter is in the mosque and maybe there are guys around and they're observing, not every father is comfortable. Not every mother is comfortable. I'm just being honest with you.
We can't have CIA follow every
It's not the
kid.
end of the world if somebody look at my daughter, as long as he don't touch her or he don't say anything to her.
How they are raised is what matters.
Exactly.
Any perspectives from the other side? Yes, sister. Of course, you can't satisfy everyone, definitely. That's one potential solution. See, if we don't give the youth structure, I'll tell you what has happened in some youth groups. Okay, sometimes some youth groups are pretty open, where they allow the youth to mingle, so they get to know one another. It has happened that sometimes the youth exchange numbers, a relationship develops without the family's knowledge, and God knows what happens. It has happened. It has happened. I'm being honest with you. I'm not talking theory here. I'm telling you what has happened in many communities and many youth groups. So leaving it happens everywhere. So leaving it without structure is not a good idea. But what could work, what is a solution, potential solution, is to have a supervised setting where the youth have an opportunity to meet. For instance, I'll tell you out of my own experience of where this has worked and I've seen it work. Retreats. Just 2 weeks ago, I was at a retreat. 3 days. We were 80 or so brothers and sisters. It's supervised. We have a team of volunteers. We know exactly who's up to what. You know, after the program's over at 12, we don't allow anyone to go and mingle in the hallway and talk because you don't know what will happen. It's supervised. We'll sit in one room. 3 days, we have workshops, discussions, competitions, whatever it is. But it's an environment where it's modest. If someone's violating, you know, some laws of modesty or Islamic values, it can be corrected on the spot. And it gives the youth an opportunity to observe one another. The youth tell us we need an environment like that. If I'm potentially interested in a person, sometimes by observing them for 2-3 days, you can get an idea of that person. The way they walk, the way they talk, says a lot about the person. The way they get up and stand in line to get food at lunchtime says a lot about your personality. See, sometimes the youth, they're observing, and after 3 days, they realize, you know what, that person seems to be good. And then they take the appropriate channels, which we'll discuss. And I've known many of our youth, alhamdulillah, they're in successful marriages. They got to know one another at retreats, Islamic retreats. So we do need venues, my dear brothers and sisters, that are supervised. There is a structure, it could work. But just to leave it without structure is not a good idea. It could lead to negative consequences. So what we need more in our communities, in our religious institutions, may be more of such programs, where we get the youth together in a very appropriate setting, but give them an opportunity to know one another. And yes, if we suspect that there's something wrong, maybe someone is here is not that serious, there are ways to address that. That's why I said it needs to be supervised. There must be some level of supervision to make sure that everyone is in a safe environment and no one's being taken advantage of the other. That could be a potential solution. Any thoughts about this? How do you brothers feel about this? Let us know. Please, and be honest. Does this work? Does this not work? What are the risks? Yes, brother. Most communities are probably like that, yeah.
You go to other center, it's not a mosque, it's like a club. Everyone is mixed with everyone. And some people happy with that. Now, what we chose, for example, something in between.
A middle solution, a middle path.
The center is open for everyone. Everyone can talk to anyone. But at the time of the lecture, just to have more concentration. Now, some people say, but in the college different than center. We are not in a college. We are in a center which has some spiritual level, supposed to be observed. Otherwise, no one will object anything in the college because the college is open. It's more just about knowledge. This is knowledge and spiritual. So this has to be kept in mind. We cannot compare, for example, the mall and the college with a center. Completely different ballgame. That's another. The third thing, if what you are suggesting, I'm sure none of the center will do the retreat inside the center. Almost sure. I'm not saying 100%, 99.9. Yes, you can find a place very well supervised to do something like this. But you cannot apply that in the centers, in the Islamic center, for many reasons. So definitely, one more thing, when we talk about the youth, we had, for example, several youth programs here. So one of the sisters was supervised at one time, one of our brothers here. Many of the youth don't come. We even make now the youth programs outside the center. And still, majority of the people don't come. Why? This is the question. Why? Because you don't start at the level of the youth. You have to start way before that time to make the people understand when you're doing something, because many people, the minute they hear this is Islamic Center youth program, they have objection because they have never been in contact with Islam. That's why Islam emphasizes on you start early in ages. Then you can get the fruit at the time of the youth. Otherwise, why you have all the programs outside in the coffee shops for youth? Very few people attend. So that is a little bit more complicated than putting people together. That's my point.
Very valid concerns, my dear brothers and sisters. And sometimes, organizers of programs do have insight. They have experience with what works, with what doesn't, what are some complications, what are some challenges. And so it's not that easy. We can't just put youth together. It's easier said than done. It comes with a lot of impediments, a lot of challenges that need to be overcome. The community needs to change their attitude. Families need to better raise their children with Islamic values. See, these are all conditions. You can't just bring youth, hayyallah yallah, get to know one another, when a lot of these steps have not been taken. We need to take that into consideration as well. So yes, I completely agree, my dear brothers and sisters, that religious institutions can play a very positive role, and they can definitely do a better job in creating and coming up with solutions for our youth. But it doesn't mean that the burden's on them. It's on the families. From day one, how they're raising their children, how they're preparing them for this stage. That's more important, my dear brothers and sisters. And basically, I will tell you out of experience, what is the single greatest factor that discourages our youth from coming forward with their intentions of marriage, even if they have someone whom they think is good? Many of the youth, by the way, they potentially are interested in someone. They've met somewhere. Maybe some struggle with finding a potential person of interest, but many of them do. But the reason why they don't pursue it is because of fear of rejection. Fear of rejection by who? Not the opposite person, gender whom they're interested in. No, parents. It's a big problem. Parents today, and I'm not here to generalize, but because we do have a major problem, I will say it, my dear brothers and sisters. No one should take this offensively. Parents are not playing a positive role when it comes to marriage, unfortunately. Just last year, a brother told me that his friend had proposed, was interested in a person, did the research, realized, okay, she has the good qualities. So the person proposed, sent someone on his behalf to talk to the father and see if they can work on this. The father asked 2 questions about this man. Can you guess what they were? You got one of them. The first question was, how much money does he have? He didn't even care about the job. At least if you ask about the job, okay, I see your point. The person did not even ask about the job. How much money does he have? Yani inshallah it's from haram, I don't care, as long as he has that money. That's the message he's sending. What's the second question, you know? I wish it was, where is he from? It was a lot more specific than that. Which village is he from? Wallahi. We have a big problem when the father is thinking that way.
No, but that's tribalism.
Yeah, tribalism, but it exists.
Best example is your Qazwinis were part of it. Shiri started the mosque in Islamic country. I think you go there, men or women are in the same place without this thing because we see them anyway. So I think if we have got families when a kid is interested in a girl, he's not going to go to talk to a girl. His parents should talk it over and the families can get together. That's the best way of starting the whole affair. But it just is good. We cannot live in Jordan, Pakistan, live in the United States and stay semi-reasonable. You will be all right.
So that's one very important challenge, the attitude of parents. Another challenge that we have with parents, my dear brothers and sisters, and this is a very common scenario. Let's say your daughter's 21. She's either on her way to get her bachelor's or later on her master's. Someone comes and proposes. The average parent in the community, will he accept or will he say no? Don't even think about it now. Finish, get your bachelor's, then your master's, then inshallah 75 PhDs, and then you can think about marriage. What's happening in the community, brothers and sisters? Be honest. You as parents here, if your daughter's 20, 21, she has not finished her bachelor's yet, someone comes along and the person seems to be decent, would you accept that marriage or no? Be very honest. How many of you would accept that? I am telling you, most do not. Most parents do not. No, let her finish her education. Don't think about it, Baba. Don't open the subject anymore. Khalas. Closed. Okay, you know what ends up happening? She gets her bachelor's. And then she gets her master's. She's now 24, 25. She even gets a PhD. She's now 26, 27. Now that she has a PhD, the guy feels intimidated. Many boys, I've heard from them, many guys, they know that this is a girl from a very decent family. She seems to be decent, but they're intimidated to propose because they feel that they're not at the same level. I don't have a master's or PhD. I'm not sure how this will go. I'm not comfortable going and proposing to her because from an educational perspective, she's at a higher level. So she keeps waiting until she's 28, 29, 30, and then you have all sorts of problems. This is a problem, my dear brothers and sisters. Islam says if there's an opportunity, someone comes and proposes, the person seems to be decent, has akhlaq, genuine good character, has religion, is committed to their faith, don't say no. If you say no without a wise, just reason, Allah will hit you hard. We have hadiths about that. I'm not making this up. And this is happening every day in the community. One reason why the guys, and I don't blame them, they're intimidated because you know what I say to the guys? This is what I tell them. I tell them, look, you've done research, you think this person's good, you've asked, maybe you've had a few conversations with her, okay, keep it at that. Don't keep talking to her for 2, 3, 5, 6 months. This is not healthy. First of all, you'll cross many shari'i lines, number one. Then you have the emotions and the attachments developing. That in itself leads to many problems. You really think this person's good for you? You've done research, you've asked her friends, you've asked family members. Indications are she has the good qualities. Here's what I tell the guys. Be a man, go through the front door, and officially propose. That's the right way to do it. Don't keep talking for 3, 4, 5 months trying to figure out what this is. This is wrong. Now, sometimes this works. But you know what the challenge is? These youth are intimidated. They're scared that if they do that, the parents will reject them. My dear parents, please take this from me. If a young man is coming through the front door and officially asking you, my dear parents, this man is not fooling around. If he wanted to fool around, he has other ways of fooling around. If he's coming through the front door, respect him for that. If you don't, Allah will hit you hard. I'm saying this very honestly with you. Today in our society, youth, many things are accessible to them. Don't have concerns, he's trying to take advantage of my daughter. La habibi, he's not going to come through the front door if he wants to take advantage of her. If he wanted to take advantage of her, he would have stayed in touch with her, talked to her behind your back, then he would have taken advantage of her. The fact that he's coming early on through the front door, don't reject this person right off the bat. This is wrong, but it's happening. Sometimes it happens. In fact, that's an indication that he's serious, that he's not fooling around. He's coming to you directly, the parents. Respect that, my dear parents. Don't be quick in dismissing this person. In fact, one father, may Allah guide him, how dare you come straight to us? What do you mean? What do you want him to go? How dare he? He just came to our house and he proposed. My daughter, she hasn't finished her education yet. How dare he? This is jahiliyyah, my dear brothers and sisters. This is ignorance. This is not something that will help your children. You are hurting your children, not helping them. And where did parents get the idea that your children have to be finished with their degree for them to get married? Who said that? Is there a verse in the Quran that says that? Is there a hadith that says that? Who says that? There's nothing more beautiful than a college student who's responsible, who knows what responsibility and marriage is. I'm not just saying anybody who's not responsible. There's nothing more beautiful than college students in their third year, maybe, in their fourth year, in their second year. They get married, they start a humble, small life. They go to college and they're both married. There's nothing more beautiful than that. Why are we not open to this, my dear brothers and sisters? Why is our vision of marriage, no, you have to get your degree out of the way, establish your career, inshallah, when you're 28, 30, then think of marriage. This is a wrong mindset. A strong marriage is the one that's based on humbleness and sacrifice. You know why the divorce rate is so high these days? Because people are getting married in their late 20s, early 30s. They've lived their life. They've had their challenges in establishing themselves. Now they're no longer that flexible with one another. There's something I don't like. You go your way, I go my way. Allah, let's get divorced. That's what's happening. But when they got together early on, at age 22, they got married. They were still in college together. The guy was struggling, he's establishing himself, she's establishing herself. They're working part-time, studying, and they're starting their family. And who told you you need a big house to start your family life? Who told you that? Our prophets and imams, they started in a room, for God's sake, small room. Who said you have to start your life in a mansion? Get a small apartment studio and start your marriage in that. What's wrong with that? And then expand. You have a life ahead of you. Allah will increase your rizq and sustenance. Start humble. Then when you're 30 and 35, you get into an argument, into a fight, into a problem. You're not going to quickly consider divorce because you're going to say, I've been with this person for the last 10 years. When we were humble together, when we had nothing, we stood by each other's side. Now because of this pet issue, I'm going to consider divorce. No. That solidifies the marriage for you, my dear brothers and sisters. Let's promote that amongst the youth. We've got it all wrong when it comes to marriage, unfortunately. So my dear brothers and sisters, we as parents have to be more supportive. If we find youth with serious intentions, let's facilitate it. If we don't facilitate it, it will end in negative consequences. And one mistake parents commit is sometimes the families agree, okay, you know, this young man is interested in that woman. Okay, we as families, let's work on this. Inshallah, in 2-3 years, we'll do the engagement, ketbik tab marriage. That's wrong. You don't let the youth stay in touch with each other for 2 years. Usually, that does not end well. After they fall in love with each other, and remember, they have serious intentions. Their families know. I'm not saying that they're doing this behind the backs of their families. There is intention, there's serious intention to get married, but the parents say, no, not now, not now. 2 years, when you graduate. They have emotions, and then 2 years later, one of them decides, I don't want this anymore. You know how often this is happening? You know how many people are broken because of this? Every day we are seeing these examples. They've been talking for 2-3 years. Suddenly, usually it's the guy, I'll admit. So sometimes it's the girl too. Khalas, you know, I changed my mind. I don't want you anymore. What do you mean you don't want her anymore? Well, there's no obligation. Don't blame him, blame the parents for allowing that to happen. There's no ketbik tab. She's not his religious wife yet. Yeah, he'll easily walk out. Sure, why not? There's no consequences for him. It's easy for him to do that. But you've set them up for failure. If you find them really interested in one another, they're serious, my dear brothers and sisters, khalas, let them get married. Why are you imposing a condition that no, once they graduate? Where did you get that from? If they're not responsible, you think they're still kids, and you're being objective in your assessment, of course, where you're not being unjust, then khalas, don't let them meet anyone, don't let them talk to anyone. But make sure you responsibly make that evaluation. But if they seem responsible, let them get married. Why wait 2-3 years and let them talk 2-3 years? Does not end well sometimes. And the girl is left broken, heartbroken, and she suffers for years. Sometimes it's very traumatizing, my dear brothers and sisters. I've known sisters who are into their 30s, they refuse to get married. They have marriage anxiety. You know why? Because they've been through a case like that. For 2-3 years, there were promises. They were supposed to get married. Last minute, the guy changed his mind or found another girl. She's left broken. She can't trust anyone now. She has an issue with trust. And you can't blame her because she's been traumatized. Don't put your children in that situation. What are some thoughts here, my dear brothers and sisters? Any thoughts, experiences? Yes, sister. Can you speak up a little bit, sister? Or if we can, please give her the mic.
There's when the couples are together, they found each other, and they are going to get married. There's a problem with some parents pushing the dowry, a very high dowry. And in some cultures, this is competition on who has the highest dowry, and it becomes a problem. And I'd like to know what you think about that. I know it's not right, but it's happening in so many places. And I see this. Thank you.
Now, I see another issue also. There's a generational gap between the parents who are immigrants, like first immigrants here, and their kids who are born and raised here. The parents have their own list of criteria of the spouses for their kids, and obviously the kids sometimes see things in a different perspective, and that's where the problem rises. And the parents may not be too open or too accepting of the spouse or of their kids' choices. This is another problem.
Thank you. These are two major challenges that the sisters have stated. One is the dowry. One factor that discourages a lot of guys from going forward and proposing is the dowry. They're still trying to establish themselves. They're still trying to finish their studies. They don't have that dowry that the parents are demanding. And so they just put off marriage. postpone it year after year because of this dowry factor here. Now there's two sides to this story if I want to be objective. On the one hand, it's really discouraged by the religion of Islam to put a high dowry. In fact, the Prophet ﷺ states, أَفْضَلُ نِسَاءِ أُمَّتِي أَقَلُّهُنَّ مَهْرًا. Not my words, the words of Rasulullah. The best women of my ummah are those with the least dowry. They don't complicate matters because of dowry. So on the one hand, don't make things complicated. If the person seems to be decent, he has akhlaq, he's committed, he's God-fearing, go ahead, tawakkal ala Allah. What are you waiting for? That dowry is not going to make your daughter happy. The higher the dowry does not guarantee her happiness. In fact, I've seen an inverse relationship. The higher the dowry, the more the marriage fails. I'll never forget, maybe 15, 20 years ago when I was in Los Angeles, one day a couple came and my uncle did the engagement for them. So when my uncle was getting the info from them to do the engagement, he asked about the dowry. Okay, so what did you agree on the dowry? Quickly the girl said, yes, we've agreed on the dowry, $1 million. My uncle looked at the guy, he's like, do you agree? You know, he kind of hesitated. She gave him the look. She's like, yeah, we agreed on that. So he lowered his head. He's like, yeah, I agree. My uncle told him, are you sure? Are you sure you've accepted? Because he didn't seem like he wholeheartedly accepted. He's like, yeah, you know, khalas, I've accepted. Let's put this as the dowry. My uncle said, I don't recommend this. But they insisted. She insisted and he accepted. Okay, you know, when they insist, you know, you're not going to force them. You just do the engagement for them. So he did the engagement for them. But when they left the house, they left. My uncle looked at me. He told me, mark my words. Next month, they're going to come back asking for a divorce. Guess what happened? Next month, literally, they came back for a divorce. No barakah. Allah doesn't put a barakah. When you make it a business like that, Allah takes the barakah away. He seemed well off. Maybe he did. I don't know. He seemed well off. But there's no barakah, my dear brothers and sisters. You want barakah from Allah. So that's on the one side. But then let me play the advocate on the other side. The father is saying, look, I know cases in the community where so-and-so got married and the dowry was something very, insignificant, something small. And then the guy abused her. And then 5 years later, he divorced her. And she was left with nothing but that, whatever, $1,000 dowry. Or that hajj, or whatever it is. That's not fair. My daughter now has nothing. And especially if they did it the Islamic way, they did not go through the court way where she gets half of the assets. She just accepted the dowry. So 5 years, he just ruined her life. And now she's left with nothing. That's the other perspective, right? So some parents will say, that's why I put $100,000. If he wants to do that to my daughter, at least she has something to go back to. What do we do?
She can still go to the court. No matter what they decided on the dowry, the U.S. court allows her to sue the guy.
The U.S. court allows her to sue the guy, but that's not Islamic. According to Islamic law, if the person in the marriage contract did not put a condition, she cannot pursue his wealth.
This guy did not follow Islamic law. If he was Islamic law, he would be a decent man.
No, I agree with you.
So tell that guy when he comes to you to talk to you and tell him how to get hold of it.
Let me give you a scenario here. Let me give you a scenario. Brother, sister, they get married. The guy's not abusive. He's not. Okay, he doesn't hit her. He's good with her. He spends, responsible, good husband. And the dowry was something very nominal, right? Symbolic. 6 years later, for whatever reason, there are a lot of reasons. I'm not going to get into that. For whatever reason, 6 years later, he doesn't want her anymore. Now let's face it. Technically, if you go by the letter of the law, Islamically, he has the right to divorce her. Now, is that moral to do? No. But Islamically, can he issue a divorce? Yes, he can. It's not moral, but he can. Technically, by law, he can. So what if he did that? He divorced her after 6 years. He doesn't love her anymore. He doesn't want her anymore. For whatever reason. Now, he was not abusive with her. He was a good husband those 5-6 years. So now he divorces her. He has the Islamic right to divorce her. He gives her that, let's say, mahr sunnah, $700. So after 6 years, she's just left with $700 and he doesn't want her anymore. What do you do with a case like that? No, she has no right to take him to the court. No, see, brother, we need to go by Sharia. If the day they got married, she put a condition that, look, if you divorce me without a valid reason, I'll get half of your assets. Yeah, she has the right. Put it in the marriage contract, sure. But if they did not do that, she has no right. That's haram. I'm being honest with you, that's haram money. Anything the court gives her is haram money. Ask any marja or scholar. So what do you do in this case? See, it's a tough situation. So I understand why parents are concerned about that dowry. I do understand. But at the same time, putting high dowries is not helping your kids either. And that $50,000 is not going to make your daughter happy in the future. Trust me, even if the guy divorces her. Here's my recommendation. If you go by the word of Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa sallam, if the person who comes to you has akhlaq, what does akhlaq mean? What does akhlaq mean? Know what akhlaq means. And has deen. What does deen mean? Does deen mean pray and fast only? No. That's one small part of deen. If the person who comes, you research about him, he has deen and akhlaq, chances are 90% of the time he will not do that to your daughter. One with akhlaq and deen does not do that. That's the important part. But then we get to another situation which requires another discussion, by the way. Your kids have found a potential partner. You as a parent, you do research, you're like, you know what? I don't think that guy has deen and akhlaq, but my daughter's in love with him. That's a tough one. What do you do then? You could do nothing. Khalas. So we would say, عَظَّمَ اللَّهُ أُجُورَكُمْ in that case. It's tough. It really is tough, my dear brothers and sisters. Sometimes if they have already fallen in love without your knowledge, it's a tough situation. There's no easy way out. There are some practical steps. Maybe we need another discussion to discuss them. There are some steps we can take, but it's not that easy. That's why my recommendation is before they get their emotions attached to one another, you need to go through these steps, do the research, then let them talk and be comfortable with each other. That way, if there's something wrong, there's a red flag in that personality, then you could at least, stop it from developing further, and that way they don't get hurt. But once the emotions are there, it's really difficult to do anything at that point. So don't let it reach there. Guide your sons and daughters through some of the steps we've discussed tonight so they don't reach to that point. If they've reached that point, sometimes that's it. You can't do anything about it. If they've been talking for 6-7 months, they're deeply in love with each other now, there's nothing that you can say to your daughter that's going to change her mind or say to your son. That's it. They're in love. If that person has no deen or akhlaq, you cannot communicate it to them because love blinds. You have to take the appropriate steps before they get there, my dear brothers and sisters. Today, you as parents, you know what you're doing? You're waiting and waiting and waiting and waiting comfortably until maybe your kids, they bring up the issue of marriage. You're not bringing it up. 90% of you are not. That's wrong. Be responsible parents. If you feel your children are now of age and they seem to understand what marriage is and they're going to college and they have all these challenges, you guide them through the process of marriage. You discuss it with them. You help them find the appropriate person so they don't fall into a love situation like that. What we parents, we're just pushing it. In fact, some mothers, fathers, they don't want to even talk about it with their kids, believe me. It's something that makes them uncomfortable. Why? My dear brothers and sisters, we're out of time. I know there's a lot more to discuss. Maybe inshallah we can have a part 2 and discuss some of these other challenges. I would really like to thank you for your participation tonight. Yes, brother.
One more question about this subject. Now the question is, after your experience in this society, for how much time for a couple they have a serious relationship with okay for their parents on both sides, how much time they need to talk each other to get everything?
My personal recommendation is the boy and the girl should not talk to one another more than a maximum of 1 month. 2 weeks is ideal. Anything beyond 1 month, honestly, I don't advise. It leads to negative consequences. That's it. You've done the research. The person seems to be appropriate. Okay, they spoke with each other. 2 weeks is enough. That's it. Make arrangements for the engagement and the wedding, and then let them explore each other's personality and keep something to look forward for marriage. These days, 2 years, they know each other, khalas, they're literally like husband and wife. The wedding has not happened. There's nothing to look forward after the marriage. I know you so well. The next day we get married, we're already fighting with each other. That's not a healthy start. My recommendation is maximum 1 month, maximum. Ideal 2 weeks, that's it. So I really like to thank you, my dear brothers and sisters, for your participation. May Allah bless you and your family and your children. And never underestimate the power of dua, parents, and you as youth. Ask Allah to help you through this. Allah does help. Resort to Allah. Live with Allah and make Allah the center of your life. Allah will help you. وصلى الله على سيدنا محمد وآله الطيبين الطاهرين.